What's up you guys, this is Luke with Dark Fiction Factory back with another video. There have been plenty of great fighting game franchises over the years, dating back to the earliest games like Karate Champ. Over the years we've seen mega franchises like Virtua Fighter, Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. We've even seen Marvel and DC cash in with some great games like Injustice and Marvel vs. Capcom. But some franchises have just put out cheap or very lackluster fighting games. Here's looking at you, Rocky and Cobra Kai. In this video, we're going to take a look at some properties that could potentially make a great fighting game, with one bonus idea at the end. Alright, let's start not with one franchise, but with a ton, and that is just simply horror movies. How great would it be to see Ghostface square off against Michael Myers, or Pinhead going to the death with Leatherface? Or maybe even a rematch of the classic Freddy vs. Jason. Now we have seen these characters pop up in franchises like Mortal Kombat, and there's even a pretty solid unlicensed game, Terrordrome, that is available online. Given the licensing rights, it seems unlikely we'll ever get an officially released game featuring our favorite horror icons, but we can always dream. With the popularity of horror games, things like Dead by Daylight for example, it could potentially be a huge cash cow if all the rights holders of all these different franchises could just agree to come together. The question is, who would be the most overpowered horror fighter? To change gears here, let's go back to the 1980s and good old Saturday mornings. I'm talking about a Masters of the Universe fighting game. Obviously we have He-Man and Skeletor, but the endless amount of supporting characters, both heroes and villains, could make this a very interesting game. Also, the characters in Masters of the Universe have very diverse characteristics and attacks, such as Skeletor's staff, or Triclops' eye beams, or Beastman's hulking power. This could make for some very interesting matchups. They could also have skins from the original cartoon, the 1980s film, and even the new versions like the recent Kevin Smith Netflix adaptation. Plus there would be spectacular arenas around Eternia, such as Snake Mountain and Castle Grayskull. With the news of a new live-action Masters of the Universe film, it seems like the perfect time to drop a video game. Speaking of properties that are hot right now and have been hot for many years, let's talk about Game of Thrones. A property that could definitely work for a fighting game. The swords and sandals aspect would translate nicely, and there is no shortage of badass characters from Jon Snow to the Mountain, the Hound, Jaime Lannister, the Night King, Khal Drogo. I mean, the list goes on and on. Arya Stark already appeared in Warner Brothers fighting game Multiverses, so there has been some precedent set for these characters to appear in fighting games. Here's an idea. Game of Thrones could also employ the cameo technique used in Mortal Kombat 1, where your main fighter calls in for backup. For example, you could have characters like Khaleesi as your cameo who swoops in with her dragon to deal some heavy damage or a finishing blow to an opponent. And seeing that Game of Thrones was made for a very mature audience, the final kills could be very gory and very excessive. The set designs would be amazing as well. Imagine fighting at the Wall, or King's Landing, or Winterfell. There could even potentially be a story mode that mirrors some of the shows or some of the books in some way. With the recent spin-off House of the Dragon being a hit with fans, it seems like a fighting game would be perfect for this franchise. Now there has been an announcement for Game of Thrones King's Road, which is coming in 2025, but that looks more like an RPG than a straight action game. Will we get to see a legit fighting game with the legendary characters of Westeros? It really may come down to how long Game of Thrones stays popular in the public zeitgeist. Now let's switch gears and talk about a franchise they could bring back. One of the OG fighting games that I personally would love to see rebooted is Pit Fighter. Pit Fighter was one of the first experiences with fighting games for a lot of people that are my age, a little bit older. The violent game predates Mortal Kombat, using similar motion capture to give the game a realistic look, even if the photorealistic fighters do move pretty clunky. But hey, it was the early 90s after all. This game was not very deep, with only 3 playable characters, but there were plenty of memorable fighters to face off against, such as the Executioner and Chainman Eddie, to name a few. And while the game was rough around the edges, the intensity of fighting in the pit in front of the crowd gave the game a heightened sense of intensity. With modern fighting games, such as EA Sports UFC 5, offering modes such as Kumite, which has a similar feel with sort of a Bloodsport-esque fighting element, I think a new Pit Fighter could be a huge hit. And with the success of the darker fighting games such as Mortal Kombat, it would be fun to see another gruesome, underground sort of bare-knuckle brawler fighter resurface. Here's one bonus idea. Now this is not an existing property, but how about a fighting game featuring the most ferocious, the most notorious, and the most lethal animals in the animal kingdom? The eternal question of who would win in a fight between a lion or a silverback gorilla, a hippo, or a bear, this could all be settled in this game of animal fighting technique. Now there is some precedent for this with the 1990s game Primal Rage, where players fought as varying dinosaurs as well as a gorilla named Blizzard. The game felt like a Mortal Kombat ripoff with animals, and it handled pretty clunky, but it did have its fans. If an Animal Kingdom fighting game could include animals of several different species with varying attacks and abilities, it could make for some very interesting fights. The settings would be unlimited. You could have the Sahara, the Amazon rainforest, the North Pole, Canadian waterfalls, and many more. Taking another look back at Primal Rage, the game also featured a mechanic where tiny humans would wander into the fighting area, and if you ate them, you got bonus points. That same technique could be applied here. With modern day graphics and a well thought out control system, an Animal Kingdom fighting game could be a very fresh idea in the world of video games. Okay, those are just a few ideas for some great fighting games. There are plenty more, but we'll save that for the next video. But what do you think? What movie or TV franchises do you think would work well as a fighting game? Do you think the ones that I listed would work, or not so much? Are there any dead fighting game franchises that you'd like to see rebooted or resurfaced? Let us know in the comments, and let's discuss it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. Until next time, keep your guard up, and take care.